Good afternoon, everybody. Just for introduction purposes, I'm Anthony Insaldi. I'm the town's chief financial officer. I'm also the select board's appointee to the retirement board. With us here today is Brian Whitney, who's also a member of the retirement board. A great pleasure to introduce our new executive director of the Concord retirement system, Jill Hersey. Jill comes to us from Berkshire Retirement, has a ton of experience, and we're really glad that she's here with us. Also, before I introduce our featured speaker today, I just want to introduce around the room. You'll notice representatives from Mission Square, Mike Savage, who will say a few words at when Frank's done. Timothy Wheaton, sorry, Tim, from Equitable, and Terry Finnegan from Voyer. So again, they'll come up after and talk. So what I want to do now is introduce our first speaker, Frank Zika. Frank Zika happens to be a personal friend of mine. Frank and I worked together for the town of Brookline for 13 years. If there's probably nobody better in the state that knows public retirements than Frank. Frank has agreed to come here today and put this on for those of you in the room, and we have a pretty good group at watching this remotely too. So Frank worked in Perrick, worked for Brookline, also was on the MWRA board. He's a ton of knowledge.
I did an audit in this room 37 years ago.
So Frank, we're going to start it off, and Frank's going to start talking about the new Social Security changes that came into play. So I'm going to run the presentation. Frank.
Okay. Thank you for all coming and to the deferred comp people. They're a very valuable addition to your public pension and to Social Security. I always talk about, the stability of a chair. You hear the three-legged stool argument or the four-legged stool. If Social Security you're going to learn about today, you're going to learn about your pension, deferred comp, should utilize them, and also any other savings in real estate and so forth. If you set the groundwork early and you pay attention and do a little bit of all four, you're going to have a wonderful retirement and won't have to worry about actual monies as you get older. But the presentation, Anthony's going to bring up in a second. So 2025, on January 5th of this year, there was landmark legislation signed. It was bipartisan support. I'm not going to get into who signed it and everything. It's signed. It's been a 40-year task. When they first changed it in 1977 and 83, they basically took away benefits that public employees and or their spouses have earned. So what you will learn through this presentation are the basics. Social Security rules and laws are yay high. I've broken them down into boil points that affect government employees. And I'll be around for some individual questions. I know that they are recording this, so you don't want to put your date of birth, talk about specifics about your own case. You give hypotheticals, but just this day and age with AI and all that, the less said about your personal stuff, but you can ask general questions. I'd be more than happy to answer them. The next slide. The most important thing to do is to go to ssa.gov. For each and every one of you and your spouses and or any family members that might be retired public employees and or your children, everyone should sign in and create an account with Social Security. It's pretty secure. It is very secure. So you can access your account or create a new one. It's important. It has your whole work history on there. And I can't say that they're 100% foolproof. If you filed your taxes, you asked for an extension, somehow or another, maybe through the electronic transfer, your earnings history might not be accurate. So you want to sign in here. You go to the quick right. Go to the next slide, Anthony. Next slide. Oh, it's not, I'm sorry. I'm looking at mine. Okay. You want to verify your contact information, name, address, email, phone. Check your earnings history for accuracy, look at your tax return. The monies that you make for the town of Concord will not show up as Social Security earnings because you don't pay Social Security taxes. But if you have a part-time job or prior earnings, you want to make sure it's recorded there. And I always say to download your statement. You should do it once a year or every other year for your records in case something happens to the website. You never know with AI and all that craziness. It's nice to have a hard copy of that. Next slide. This is important, investing. I think there was a gentleman that asked me earlier, I only have 32 credits. I got to get 8 more. So you need 40 credits to be vested, and you can accumulate those from when you worked part-time in high school. I joke around to some of my public safety friends that might have days off in between that you have to claim this money. So this is all above the table money and I was a painter as a young kid, and I can't say that I claimed every cent that I earned. I wish I did. My Social Security would be greater. So in the past, they referred to them as quarters, because years ago, and Uncle Joe or Auntie Mary might be right, January to March, you could only get 1 quarter. Today, if next week or the school vacation week you went and earned $7,000 or $8,000, you could get 4 quarters in 1 week. So they changed them to credits. So if I use the word credits or quarters, you can use that interchangeably. You can only get 4 in a calendar year. And in 2025, to get 1 quarter of coverage, you need $1,810 of earnings on your tax return. And if you earn, I think it's $7,240, you would get 4 in a year. It always makes sense to try to get to 40 quarters because you will get something from Social Security. Next slide. Full retirement age. Everyone says, I'm going in to collect Social Security at 62. You can. But I'll show you at the last slide. Full retirement age for anyone, and these are the years, 1960 and beyond, is 67 years of age. 54 is, and anyone born, I'm not going to guess at ages, I'm not looking at anyone in particular, but those are the ages of full retirement age. Here's something important. You can work here and collect your full Social Security if you attain full retirement age. That was always the rules. The offset never took place prior to January 5th unless you retired. So it comes down to math and financial planners, which I am not. I'll give you the raw numbers, but in 95% of the cases, it never makes sense to claim well beyond your 67. Each year you defer past your full retirement age. So if Social Security says you're going to get $3,000 a month at 67, if you start claiming at 68, you get an 8% raise. 69, a 16% raise, or 70, a 24% raise. Conversely, if you go into Social Security and collect a year earlier, you lose 8%. And you go all the way back to 62. The difference between 62 and 67 is 40%, 8% a year. But you cannot work and collect prior to your full retirement age. I used to say you're kind of handcuffed or have restrictions. I know some people have amnesia, and I jokingly say that when they go into Social Security. Are you working? No, I'm not working. Okay. They'll pay you your Social Security. They don't really do a hard check on you. But 3 years later, you will get a love letter in the mail saying, we overpaid you. You owe us all that money back. So if you're honest and upfront with Social Security, if you don't have temporary amnesia when you go in, if you're working full-time here, you cannot collect Social Security until you retire or hit full retirement age. Next slide. These are the 2 biggies. This is what changed. Social Security Fairness Act, what it means for you. And I jokingly say goodbye to the unfair restrictions. Mass retirees for 40 years has been fighting a good fight. We're trying to get this repealed. I can tell you that the stars aligned right for whatever the reason. that you had the International Association of Firefighters, Ed Kelly, previously of the Boston Fire Department. He represents the entire United States and Canada, North America, along with Mass Cops and NAPO, North American Association of Police Officers, along with Mass Retirees. The stars aligned right. They got bipartisan support, and it passed. It's effective December 31st, 2023, but in reality, it's 1/1/2024. So for everyone working here that's under the full retirement age, that's not collecting Social Security, we're not talking about the retroactivity, we're talking about benefits going forward. The windfall, and I don't make these names up, I say it every time, windfall elimination provision, commonly referred to as the WEP, there are no more reductions, restrictions if you're collecting Social Security based on your own work history as a government employee. So you signed up, that first slide, you signed up for SSA.gov. You went in and it said, you print out your statement, it says you have earned enough credits. At 62, 65, it tells you an estimated benefit of what you will get. Then you had to figure out how many years of substantial earnings and offsets. I'm not even want to, I said to myself, I'm not going to talk about it. Whatever it says, you're going to get. So if it says you're going to collect $850 a month, it might be $820, $830. It's pretty accurate, but not 100% accurate. So whatever it says, you're going to get. The second one, the government pension offset. Say goodbye to reductions when collecting Social Security benefits based on your spouse or ex-spouse's work history. Let me talk about divorce for half a second. And I say this, if you are getting divorced and you have 9 years and 9 months of marriage, find a way to get to 10 years. If there's a safety issue and so forth, do what's best for you and your family, but it means a lot. So the most anyone can collect on Social Security this year, and I'll show it to you, I think it's on the next slide, but it's $4,018 at age 67. If you are married and your spouse was a high wage earner, they would collect $4,000. You would collect $2,000. Does not affect them whatsoever. But the unthinkable happens. Your ex-spouse found door number 2 and got remarried again. They get divorced, but they happen to be married 10 years also. So your ex-spouse collects $4,000, your ex-spouse number 1, you would collect $2,000 of their benefit. Spouse 2 gets $2,000 too. I don't make the rules. I used to say the old males in Congress made the rules, therefore they benefit by the rules, but that's all gone by the wayside. We have males, females in Congress and so forth, but my jokes of 30 years ago don't quite fit today, but those rules were made many years ago when there weren't a lot of females in Congress, so therefore they benefit by the rules. But it can work in another avenue also. So the 10 years is important, but if you're in a dangerous situation, do what's best for your family. So hopefully no one gets offended by my humor or joke, but try to get to 10 years. It's important financially. So you retire, and if I say the town of Brookline, that's because that's where I work full-time, so I apologize. But if you retire from the town of Concord and your pension, whatever it may be, you're entitled to collect your benefit from Social Security or half of your spouse's or ex-spouse's benefit, whichever is higher. So the person that might have asked me a question earlier, is it worth it to me to get my 40 quarters or credits? The answer is yes, but if your spouse's wages are a lot more, you may not want to get to the 40 credits. You might want to work overtime here or work a little bit longer. It's, a decision that is, for each individual person. I don't know. I'm not a financial planner. You'll hear me say that a couple of times. I think there's some people on the outside walls that might be certified financial planners that work for Voya, ICMA, or Mission Square that might be able to help you. And I can't think of the other Equitable. They may be financial planners that can help you with that. But this is the big one. you collecting off your spouse or ex-spouse, you are entitled to half of their benefit, no restrictions. And that's when you go in to retire. Now, for Auntie Mary and Uncle Joe, that might have been a public employee, that is a retired police, a fireman, a DPW clerical worker, and they're 75 years old, and their spouse worked in banking or whatever, was a high-wage employee. They are entitled to an increase in benefits from at least January 5th forward, and or retroactive to last January of 2024. There's a number of different scenarios. I don't want to go through each one, but as an example, today I had a retired police officer call me, 73 years old. He's collecting $300 Social Security. His wife is collecting $900 Social Security. He went into the Norwood Social Security office, and 45 minutes later, he called me and says they're increasing my benefit by $150 because he's being increased to half of his spouse's earnings, and it's retroactive 6 months. The fine-tuning on that legislation has not been issued by Social Security. So he didn't know whether he filed a spousal application 6 or 8 years ago. So he filed, and I recommend to uncles, aunts, brothers, sisters, relatives, they talk about filing a protective filing on the International Association of Firefighters website. They have a very in-depth article about protective filing to go down. At least you can go back 6 months in case it doesn't go all the way back to January of 2024. No more offsets, WEP, and GPO. That to me means a lot to everyone in this room and your families and to anyone that you know worked in government. Next slide, Anthony. The two areas I highlighted on this is if you Google it, the 2025 Social Security fact sheet. It has a lot of information, but a quarter of coverage in 2025 is $1,810. Retirement earnings, test exempt. So if you retired at 63 years of age and you go into Social Security and you say, I'm going to start collecting because I'm not going to work anymore. You could collect, but if all of a sudden a dream job opens up and you make more than $23,000, $23,400 for every $2 over, you lose $1 of Social Security. What I mean by that is you start collecting your Social Security or your spouse or ex-spouse Social Security $1,000 to $2,000 a month, and you're 63, you have earnings restrictions. You cannot make more than $23,400. Once you go over that, they're going to take, for every $2 over, they're going to take $1 away from Social Security. So if you get a job for $60,000, you shouldn't have claimed Social Security. So they'll take it away, bill you, you can stop it, and start it up the following year. So really think twice about going in and claiming Social Security before your full retirement age. That's a decision between you and your family. I can't tell you when to claim, but it's, and a lot of financial planners don't know, or they should know about the WEP GPO law changes that might affect in the future. And on the second page on the right-hand side, it says maximum Social Security benefit is $4,018 per month. And there's a lot of other stuff on here, Social Security, disability, and all that. So I don't want to confuse the issue. I just want you to know that leaving here today, whatever, when you sign into SSA.gov, whatever it says you've earned, you will collect. And if you are married or divorced, married more than 10 years, you'll be entitled to half of your spouse's Social Security. Whichever is higher, you can only collect one Social Security benefit. And I think we agreed that I'll take questions after everyone speaks, so I'm not going anywhere. And now we'll morph over to the town retirement. Just as a hint, has anyone here started prior to April 2nd, 2012? Okay. We'll start with you guys first. So if you started after the rules changed, the two major rule changes are that your retirement is based on a 5-year average. The second is the multiplier. You hit the maximum multiplier at age 67. Five-year average and the maximum multiplier. So if you see if you go to the locker room down at the DPW, or if you're the three bad people in retirement, I usually start off with this. I heard someone said, and I thought, do not pay attention to any one of those people, especially with Social Security and in retirement, especially with the change. Because what Uncle Joe was talking about, quarters and coverage might have been right, but not right today. 3-year average versus 5-year average. If you started after April 2nd, it's a 5-year average. Prior to April 2nd, 2012, it's a 3-year average. It's your highest 3 years. 52 times 3, 156 pay periods if you're paid weekly. We've had a couple of lawsuits. Well, within that 3-year period, there's 157 pay periods. It's your highest 156 weeks. The multiplier, simply put, age 60 for Group 1 employees. Group 1 are non-police and fire and non-electricians. At age 60, the multiplier is 2.0. 2.0 times 40 years of service is 100. The rumor, someone said, if your age and years of service add up to 100, you're going to get 80%. Not true. It works out in that particular example. But I was talking to a paraprofessional that has 4 years in. She's 73 years old. And she was doing the math. Says, I'm going to get 80% in 14. I said, no, you need 32 years of credible service. That's the least amount of time to get to 80%. So if you take 60 times 2.0 times 40 is 80%. 65 for pre-April 2nd, 2012. 32 times 2.5 equals 80%. So if you started in government late, prior to April 2nd, you still have to get to 32 years to get to 80%. If you started earlier, this year will be my 40th year, and I hit it a little bit earlier. I had to wait till I was 61 to get to 80%. April 2nd, 2012 and after, the maximum multiplier is at 67. But prior to that, the age factors are a little different. And Jill brought up a couple of charts. And I'm just going to look at, where's the after? Here we go. The after multiplier at 67 is 2.5. At 66, it's 2.35. And at 65, it's 2.2. I can't memorize those because I've spent 30-odd years remembering 60, 2.0, 61, 2.1. It really starts at 55. 55 is 1.5 times your years in service equals retirement percentage. So age factor times years in service gives you your retirement percentage. So hopefully the 2012 people aren't looking to retire anytime soon, but because people are living longer. Social Security increased the ages from 65 to 66 and 67 because people are living longer and paying out benefits longer. I think I asked the retirement board, you're about 92 or 3% funded, so you're in the top tier of funding levels in Massachusetts, which is a good thing. High 3-year average times your retirement percentage. So I'm just going to use 60,000 as or 50,000 times 80% under option A is 40,000. You take option A, you will get $40,000 a year for the rest of your life. You die, your spouse or beneficiaries get nothing other than the last month's check prorated. Option C is commonly referred to as the spousal provision. This is where I get some of my jokes. If your spouse is 10 years older, you lose less. That's a good thing. If your spouse is 10 or 15 years younger, you lose a lot. You pay the price. no spousal jokes, but if they're the same age, at 55 and 55, the difference between option A and option C is about 6.5%. So instead of getting 80% of 50,000, the 40, you get about 6%, 6.5% less. At 65, you lose 11% if you and your spouse are the same age. We once had a gentleman, I don't make up these stories, but this is about as outrageous as it gets. He was 90, his spouse passed away, still working for the city of Boston, and he wanted to leave a benefit to his child who was 67. Instead of him getting $40,000 using that $50,000 salary, he was going to get $11,000 because it's based on actuary life tables. So option A is the most you can get, 80% of your high 3 or 5 year salary. Option C, the spousal provision, depending on the age gaps between you and your spouse, depends how much you will or won't lose. If your spouse is 10 years older, you might only lose 2 or 3%. No one told you that 20 or 30 years ago when you get married to pick an older spouse if you were coming into government, but those are the rules. Option B is you lose about 2% of your A benefit. At 65, you've put money into your account. When you retire, your retirement allowance is made up of the money you contributed. The town puts in an appropriation every year that amounts to about 3.5% to 4%, maybe 4.5% of payroll. They put it in, they put millions of dollars into the pension fund each year. If you're a veteran, you may get veterans benefit. And after you're retired, one full fiscal year, you retire June 30th of this year, you would be eligible for a cost of living the following July. So there are basically 4 components if you retire long enough. It'd be annuity, the return of the monies you contributed, the pension, which is part of the money the town contributed, and the interest earned. They invest the funds, and I know that Concord has done very well over the years investing the money. So you have annuity, pension, veterans benefit of a maximum of $300 per year, and a cost of living adjustment. That's what makes up your retirement allowance. When you take option B and retire and you're 65, the money in your account lasts about 9.8 years, so about 10 years. So if you take option B because you have $100,000 in your account and you die a month after you retire, your beneficiary or beneficiaries will get the return of that $100,000 that was in your account. If you retire 10 years after you retire, there's nothing in your account. You still get your monthly benefit, but there'll be nothing left but the last month's check prorated for a beneficiary. If you retired at 55, it takes about 11 years for your money to be absorbed because it's paid out at a lower rate. So that's options A, B, and C. But in most cases, in July of 2004, they changed the annuity tables. So Uncle Bob and Auntie Marie might have been right. Take option A and buy a life insurance policy because the difference between A and C routinely was 18 to 20%, which was a lot of money. Today, I can guarantee you, Warren Buffett would tell you, take option C because the offset is so small. If you're relying on your pension to survive, if you sell your house in Concord for $10 million, maybe you don't need to take option A, B, or C, but from a financial planning strategy point of view, option C is planning for the worst, hoping for the best, and it has guarantees. You take option C, and you, the retiree, the employee that retired, dies, your spouse will get 2/3 of the benefit for the remainder of his or her life. The unthinkable happens is that your beneficiary dies first, you pump up to A. So that's the only one that moves. You can't take A 3 months later and say, oh, I meant buyer's remorse, I meant to take C. You can't do it. Police and fire, they have different benefits. They have bargain fund, they've earned them, heart, lung, and cancer presumption. But for all employees, not just police and fire, we strongly recommend that you have a physical as close to retirement as possible. If you get the bad news that you got 3 months to live, we would say don't retire. Doesn't happen that often, but in 40 years, it's happened a half a dozen times, where someone said, I've been given 6 months to live. So we'll use that 80% of 50,000 is 40,000 under A. Under option C, it's $36,000. If you retired, your spouse would get 2/3 of 36, $24,000 a year. If you die while employed, they would collect the full 36. So it's only if you are dealt what I call the death notice that we would tell someone maybe to use their vacation or sick time. Not if you have a shoulder, knee, or back, and I don't want to. It's only if you were dealt the death notice. The town manager came to me and said, why are you telling Bobby to use his sick time? He said, do you want your spouse to get $36,000 a year for life or $24,000? I'd want them to get 36, well, of course, because he died 4 months later and the wife got 36,000. Jill knows a lot about these rules. The board members know some general stuff. If you have questions, I always say, you can talk to a board member, but sometimes you talk funny, they listen funny. Go to the director, they'll have their case, your start date, your spouse's birth date. It's important. And do it now. If you have military time to buy back and you haven't bought it back, there's been some recent changes on the veterans benefits. If you worked in another retirement system and you took your money out, or you might have worked in a temporary position, you might be eligible to buy it back. So I know I threw a lot at you, but you should go to the retirement office, and so you can get, just like on the Social Security website, make sure that don't show up at 65 and say, whoa, back in 22 years ago, who knows where those records are. If there's something, make sure your record is accurate now, and update your beneficiaries. Option D is in David. None of us know when we're going to die. If you are single and you don't have a spouse, you can name your mother, father, brother, sister, son or daughter, spouse, or the first love of your life, your ex-spouse, as your beneficiary. Option D, even if you are married, it is, I wouldn't say recommended, but these are just different avenues to protect the assets or your life income streams. You could name one person as your option D. If you're married, you could name your most responsible child as a beneficiary. If you and your wife, God forbid, I used to say if the plane goes down, but we won't talk about that due to the recent tragedies, but if you get hit by a bus crossing the street, both you and your spouse die at the same time, your option D would get a lifetime benefit. Conversely, if you die and you do have an option D, your spouse holds all the trump cards. He or she has the 4 aces. She could say, nope, I don't want the option D for the child or your mother. I want it. They have the ability. It's just about protecting your pension and paying out as into the most responsible manner as you chose. I can go on and on. I don't want to do that, take up too much of your time. I'll be here for questions after. And as a follow-up, I said to Anthony, if you want to have a special session about certain things at another time, I'd be more than happy to come back to help out.
So, yeah, Frank will stay and he'll answer some questions and we'll take as many as we can in the time that we have. But I wanted to have our partners from, the second aspect of really saving for that retirement is the folks that we have around the room, right? It's Voya, it's Mission Square, and, oh my God. Equitable. I'm sorry, Tim. You know, it's important that we save in addition to our retirements, our public retirement. So I'm gonna have them come up, just talk real briefly about their services. They'll also be here if you want to make any changes or make any appointments to talk about anything that you want. And again, we'll take questions as soon as they come up.
I just have one thing. Jill brought it to my attention. I overlooked one thing. On the GPO, when you are collecting benefits off of your spouse or ex-spouse, they must file first. So if your spouse is a high wage earner, is 10 years younger than you got to wait 10 years for them to file for you to get that. So in order to collect off of your spouse or ex-spouse, they have to file first. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Sure. Hello, my name is Terry Finnegan, and I represent the Voya 457 Deferred Comp Plan. I don't want to stand too close to the microphone. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I usually don't need it. My job here for the town for many, many years, I've been instructed to use the microphone. My job here for many years is, number one, to get the employees started in the deferred comp plan to enroll you, and the importance of why you need to save for retirement to supplement your pension. In addition to enrolling in the plan, I also want to make sure, and I always encourage you to increase each and every year. And why do I do that? Because deferred compensation is a tool to supplement your pension. As lucky as you are to have a pension, it is guaranteed to become worth less and less over time. Cost of living goes up, rate of inflation goes up, your savings should go up. So I'm going to keep this brief because you've learned a lot, you've been informed, you've been given a lot of information. That's my job when you're working for the town of Concord. You want to accumulate assets to supplement your pension. What happens at the end of your career here for the town, or when you have a pension? When you get closer to retirement, we want to start thinking about how is this portfolio invested. We probably want to start getting a little more conservative. You want to make sure the money is there when you need it. And back to my example of cost of living and rate of inflation, a very minor example might be a firefighter who in 2015 went out at 80% of pay. Well, 80% of pay might have been $48,000 a year. You know, what does that look like today in 2025? Probably going to affect your living, the way your lifestyle. So in comes your deferred compensation. Voya, send me $400 a month. So your pension was here. Cost of living, rate of inflation has gone up each and every year. Your pension does not necessarily, there's no COLA associated with your pension. So there's the importance of 457 deferred compensation. It's there when you need it. And so when you find yourself, most often, side note, when you're listening to advice on the radio, remember, they're really not talking to an audience that has a pension. So most of us don't have to tap into our deferred comp after we retire. We have our pension. We can supplement our income with, we might have a second job. You could have a whole other career because some people retire so young. So back to the example of, say, a firefighter going out at 80% in 2015, what does that look like today in 2025 with the cost of living, rate of inflation? Voya, send me $400 a month. The following year, the year after, Voya, make it $500 a month. That's coming from your deferred comp. That deferred compensation only cost you $20 per pay period, right? Which is about $16 out of your pocket. But it accumulated over the years that you were working and compounded. So many of my people walk out the door with quite a nice retirement account. So I really encourage you, if you have not taken advantage of the plan, it's never too late to get started, okay? You can always save. If you get $10,000 in there, you've got $10,000 in there. I hope you walk out with $500,000 or $250,000. But that being said, again, Terry Finnegan with Voya, I've been with the town for many years, and you can call me with any questions. Use me as a resource. I work for the town. I'm happy to help you, and thank you for your time.
Hey, buddy, I'm Mike Savage with Mission Square Retirement. Used to be ICMARC. We're really one of the same company. Unfortunately, past CEO decided they want to change the name. They didn't ask us first. So we're one of the same company. We didn't change company. We didn't change anything else. I've been here for 23 years. But I want to expand on a couple things Frank mentioned. I've been fortunate to do this for 30 years in 4 different states. So by far, through Mass, Rhode Island, Connecticut, and Vermont, by far, the best pension system is right here. You can be in Rhode Island and it's a train wreck. You can be in Connecticut where every city and town has their own plan. So when you come here, you're going to be in a plan better. It's going to give you a better benefit than what Social Security would give you if you were in the private sector your whole career. So don't think you're taking a step backwards because you're in the town's pension versus being in Social Security. You are not. So the reason we talk about 457, which is your version of 401k. Why I want to get a fancy name, I have no idea. So you're putting the money away. It's hard to do because you're like, I really can't afford to do that, but you really need to have something to supplement the pension. It's like somebody retiring on just Social Security. You can see in a year from now, they're back to work because they have to, not because they want to. That's a big difference. If I'm driving a parts car for Napa in retirement, that's great. I want to. If I want to leave and say, see you later, that's fine too. So you need other assets that help you. Not that 457 is the cure-all for retirement. It's not. But it is for savings. The reasons the plans work is, I call it good news, bad news. Bad news is you cannot access the money in a 457 plan while you're working for the town. Anybody know the good news? You can't access the money while you work for the town. So it's more of a forced savings, money in a lockbox you can't take out whenever you want to. So what I suggest to people, when you start putting money away, keep in mind, this is not for a new deck on the house in 10 years, not for kids' education in 12 years. This is whenever you separate service. So whenever you leave town employment, at whatever age, for whatever reason, you can access the money in the plan, and there are never early withdrawal penalties. There's no age requirement. Every other plan out there, IRAs, 401ks, have an age of 15 and a half. You have to retain not to incur that 10% penalty. So 457 plans exclusively have no age requirement. Beneficiaries, Frank touched on, please. Life insurances, all retirement plans, IRAs, 457 plans, please make sure your beneficiaries are up to date. Because whoever's listed has first right to the account when you're passing. So many of us have a few examples we don't really want to share, but they're factual. Think of a person who got divorced 10 years ago, got remarried. I'm sitting down with those couple down in Mid-Cape, and I asked her name. She came in with her husband. He was the officer. And it didn't jive with what I saw on my screen. So I asked her age, thinking I might have messed that up. Well, now I just dug a hole for myself and for the sergeant, because then she asked me later on, why'd you ask? Because the person listed as a beneficiary was indeed his ex-wife from 10 years ago. So I pull out a form, get that fixed. I saw him several months later outside of the police station, and he goes, Mike, we were laughing in there. When we came outside, she was not laughing. So please, whatever you have out there, make sure they are up to date. If you list nobody at all, you can be married 60 years. Guess where you're gonna have your survivor to? Go to probate court, which means now your survivors have to spend money to get your money out. So please keep those things in mind as just part of having a good retirement and take care of your survivors in the event of your early passing. All right, Tim?
Good afternoon. Tim Wheaton from Equitable, one of the deferred comp providers for the town. Regardless of what vendor you use, it's something that you should definitely do. As Terry mentioned, it's a 401k for municipal employees, and I don't need to rehash the same information that the other reps went through, but just to give you some updates on the plan rules, as there have been some changes recently due to Secure Act. Contribution limits went up, 23,500 for those below 50, 31,000 for 50 and above, and now there's a new limit for those who hit age 60 to 63. You can do 34,750 this year. Plan allows for loans. So if there is a situation where you need to access money before separation from service, that could come in handy where you're able to borrow against your own balance, tax-free, penalty-free, as long as you pay it back. You can borrow up to 50% of the balance with a maximum loan of 50K. Those are all IRS rules. Distributions, this is the big advantage compared to other retirement plans. As Mike said, there's no age-based distribution, so as soon as you separate from service, you could start taking it out. Now, in most situations, if you separate from service early, maybe there's a job change, you can of course roll it over to whatever your new employer offers, but hopefully everyone is happy here with the town. If you have any questions about the investment options available, we're happy to set up one-on-one times, either virtually or in person. Feel free to stop by our table, and be happy to answer any questions or set up a time. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim. So now's the time. If anybody has any questions, just go right up to the mic. And if anybody remotely has a question, just raise your hand, and we'll kind of do one from the floor and then one from online. So together we have about 60 people that are participating. So Good, sir.
So is there a COLA increase at all for anything?
Good, you can, you want. There is a COLA from Social Security. If you were retired and collecting, there's a formula. It's got to do with the Consumer Price Index and a couple of other things. 4 years ago, there was a 9% COLA, which is about the most I've ever seen. This January, the COLA was 2.5%. So, 2.5%. Last year, the December to January benefit went up 2.5%. So there is a COLA on your Social Security. There also is a COLA on your public pension. In order to be eligible, you have to be retired 1 full fiscal year. If you retire June 30th of this year, 25, you'll get a COLA July 1, 2026. If you retire July 5th, you won't get a COLA till July of 2027. And the base in Concord is 3% on 14,000, which is $420 per year. Some people want to wait till July 5th because they're getting a 1% raise and their vacation buyout. I can assure you that COLA you'll have lost $400 per year for the remaining years. So you speak to Jill at the retirement office. I mean, if your birthday's in July, then you probably need to get to that age factor maybe. She's an expert. She knows what she's doing in regards to picking the right date to retire between you and your spouse's birthdays.
And it does compound, so if your benefit is less than the $14,000, then over the years it will compound and keep rising up. Also, for that C option for the spousal benefit, it would be 2/3 of whatever you're receiving at the time of your death. So those COLAs that you've incurred or that you've received over the years. So if you started out at $900 and then when you passed away you were up to $1,200, they would get the 2/3 of that $1,200.
And just one other thing to add that Frank mentioned on your retirement plan, the first 14,000 at 3%. One of the things that we had a discussion at our last meeting was to kind of look at that every year because we do have the option of increasing that. It takes a town meeting vote, and it's something that we want to take a look at when our actuarial's doing the valuations on our plans. So, because if we did that, there's obviously, as Frank said, we're about 92% funded, which is really, really good. And we're expected to be fully funded in 2031, which is probably the envy of a lot of communities. But by upping that would also now add some time on. So, but we did make a commitment that we want to look at this yearly moving forward. Other questions? No question's a bad question.
I thought that Medicare was tied into Social Security, and are they now going by credits rather than quarters?
I can answer that. Medicare, if you are retired, you are required to get Medicare at age, so if you retired at 63 years old.
Yeah.
At 65, your insurance would require you to get Medicare coverage. Medicare in 2025 is $185. In order to qualify, you would have to have attained 40 quarters of credits, or your spouse or ex-spouse married for more than 10 years and over age 62 would have to have their 40 quarters. You can qualify off a spouse or ex-spouse as long as they're over age 62. A friend of mine just retired a couple of years ago. He hit 65. His spouse was 60. He never paid into Social. He couldn't get Medicare coverage until she turned 62. So answering your question, Medicare if you're, and I'm not saying you, please, but I had a person retire at age 73. She didn't need to sign up for Medicare because she was still actively employed. When she retired, she had to prove, there's a couple of forms that whoever handles the health insurance with the town, you provide the Social Security that from age 65 to 73 or 4, or what, you had to prove that you have coverage so you don't get hit with the penalty. So Medicare, and then you get the supplement. Medicare A and B are your primary, you get that at age 65 if you're retired. Then you get a supplement plan through the town, which picks up any costs that are not covered under the A and B. Does that answer your question? To qualify for Medicare, either you or your spouse or former spouse would need 40 quarters of credits. They're both-
Well, let's say somebody retired from the system after, maybe at age 75 or something, but hadn't qualified for Medicare, and then subsequently worked and would they be penalized for getting the credits after the age or not?
So that's a very good question. I'll give you the bad news. Yes, you do get penalized.
Okay.
So when you retire, not you, whoever retired at 60, 75, and didn't have Medicare A and B, the town puts you on a non-supplement plan. If you then, and again, if you live in state, I'm thinking, do you belong to the GIC? So in Brookline, we belong to the Group Insurance Commission. So I don't want to speak, I don't know if the HR person's here, hopefully I didn't tread on their turf, but if you don't qualify for Medicare, you can get a non-Medicare plan. But it only covers you if you live here. If you move out of the network to California or Florida in a non-Medicare plan, the GIC premium for a broader plan skyrockets. So the penalty for Medicare is 10% a year. I'm working with the case right now, just give you an example. The gentleman I work with, his dad is 93, his mom is 65, she's probably 70 by now. She retired, and she had to prove that the spouse was covered under that plan from 65 to 93. Half of the companies are out of business. They can't even prove it. We have an appeal into Social Security. We're in the process of going to what we call go to your congressional office. His Medicare premium is 280% more because it's 10% a year after 65 if you can't prove that you had health coverage. And it sounds backwards that if you eventually qualified so many years after you're 65, not you, but whoever, that you do get penalized. But yes, you do. But if you go to Social Security, and again, when you go to Social Security, keep a log of what you gave them, and all information, ask for copies, because rules change and sometimes you might not get the best advice. Hopefully you do. But yeah, you do get hit with the penalty. Sorry. Not you, but whoever.
Questions, anybody online? Just raise your hand if you have a question, or anybody in the room? Okay, one question online. Go ahead, Eric.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. I just have a question regarding deferring retirement. If you were someone who is younger and was looking, maybe somewhere down the line retiring before, I'm in group 4, so retiring before the age of 50, how that would work.
So in group 4, there's a couple you can defer. There's no question about that. It's age factor driven. but the amount of your benefit each birthday, it's worth more, depending how many years you had. If you left it, I've had people that have had 18 or 20 years in group 4 and left when they were 35 or 40 and want to come back at 55. I can't speak to, but I don't believe you get group health coverage till you draw a retirement check. So you can defer if you leave. Does that answer your question, or was there more to the question?
No, not necessarily. I think it's a case by case basis. But I just wanted to know if generally, if that's something that you've seen in the past.
Go ahead.
I've seen people defer their retirement in both groups. And I would say that once you hit, with group 4, obviously it's more 50. If you're pre-April 2012, then it's 50. If you're post, then it's, 55 or older. Group 1, it's 60 or 65. But I have noticed that a lot of people think that, oh, if I wait till that max age and get that max age factor, that's better off. Whereas you have to think about, like Frank said, you won't be able to get the health insurance until your retirement date. And I've done a lot of calculations, and people that say want to retire at 62 versus waiting till, say, 67 for that max age factor, or 65, what are you giving up in that meantime between the insurance benefits and the money? Because, money at this day is different money 5 years from now. And I've done a bunch of calculations, and it comes out to being anywhere up to 20 years that it will take you to earn back that money that you've given up waiting for that max age factor.
So there's health insurance, as Jill had said, very important, because health insurance pre-65 for a family plan can run north of $20,000 a year. So it depends. Are you going to a job where you're getting health insurance? Is there a chance you might come back? The grass looks greener, but then something crazy happens. So, and your deferred comp people, if you leave at 62 or 63 and you want to take a year of deferred comp to another birthday, Jill and I are not financial planners. We give you the raw numbers, but you may want to talk to them and say, this is what I would get today. This is what I would get if I wait. What do you think? And, the best financial planners in the world are you and your spouse looking in the mirror, knowing what you should do. This isn't about hoping and praying. The retirement system in Concord is what I call the big G. It's a guaranteed benefit. The deferred comp, you are susceptible to the markets, but over time they tend to go up. And as you get older, I think one of the speakers talked about dialing it back a little bit. None of us know where the stock market is, let alone 2 hours ago to now, but where it's going to end up at the end of the year. So I always go back to my motto, plan for the worst and hope for the best.
And Frank, you can, this microphone working, just add to that, and correct me if you think this is appropriate. Is anybody that's thinking of leaving the public sector, regardless of the reason, in that question's case, maybe a lot of years in looking to defer when he collects the retirement, or maybe you've only been in public service for 5 years and you're leaving public service, just highly recommend you think strong and hard before withdrawing your money out of the system. Oh, there we go. Because it gives you, there's a couple things. Keeping your money in the system helps, especially if you find out the grass isn't greener and you come back, you don't have the expense of a buyback, and you may have been a member prior to another benefit structure change, which keeps you into the older structure. So just, it was a good point to mention, Ed, before you withdraw your money because you're leaving to embark on a completely different career path, think about keeping your money here for a while until you really know whether it makes sense to take it out or not.
I always tell people, if you're leaving for greener pastures, I just talked to a gentleman this morning. His salary is $88,000 a year. He has 12 and a half years of service in. He's age 40. He's selling real estate and he's doing really well. He said, and I said, real estate goes this way, this way, this way. I don't know that. And we went through the numbers that if you worked so many more years, what your benefit would be. So a very good point. If you do leave, I can tell you that the most you can collect from Social Security is this year's $4,000. If you stayed here long enough, you'll get 80% of your pay which in most cases is a lot more than 4,000. So there's the short-term and long-term outlook. But also, if you got a great job and you go work for Raytheon and leave your money in for 6 months to a year till you know you're not going to come back, or if you move out of state. If you come back, you can always add. If you take your money out, there's a lot of expenses, taxes if you don't roll it over. If you do take it over, roll it over. But come to the retirement office, think it out, and especially if you have a bad day. I have a lot of DPW guys that, ooh, it's cold out. I can't do this anymore. Thank you for the work that you do. You're freezing your keister off. I'm not doing it. I want to take my money out and I'm leaving. Settle down. It's going to be warmer next week. Let's see what we can do. But don't make crazy decisions. The retirement office is a guaranteed pension. It's a great benefit. You just have to put your time in, just like Social Security. Social Security bases what they pay you on a 35-year average. A lot of you have zeros, but you will get something.
Any other questions online? Just raise your hand. Anybody in the room? All right, so I don't see anybody, so I just want to thank, first of all, Frank, thank you for your time coming here today. I think that this was very informative, and hopefully we'll do this. I'm not quite sure on the last time Concord did this, but hopefully we'll do it again. Thank you to our representatives from Boyer, Equitable, and Mission Square. They will be here, and Frank still will be here for a little bit. So if you were shy and want to ask that question personally, or you have a personal question, feel free. These folks are very helpful. Get their contact information. Planning for our future is everything, and we're all here to help. And if we can do anything for you, please reach out. Jill is at the retirement office. This will be on the website. Frank's presentation about Social Security, we will put that on the website on the retirement board's page. But seeing no more questions, I want to thank everybody for coming, and feel free to hang around and ask individual questions. Thank you.